Welcome to Brighton, October 1986, where the town's autumn streets looked calm, peaceful, almost ordinary. Yet beneath the falling leaves, a darkness was creeping. Two 9-year-old girls, Nicola Fellows and Karen Hadaway, disappeared into the shadows of a quiet forest clearing. Their fate unknown. A man moved unseen, watching, waiting. And one child would survive to whisper, "He can't know I'm alive." October 1986. Brighton, England. The crisp air carried a chill that made the branches tremble. A faint rustle in the undergrowth. Russell Bishop, a local tradesman, moved among the streets and alleys seemingly ordinary. Yet the children wandered unknowingly into danger. The town remained oblivious to the horror about to unfold. Before we begin, leave a comment below with where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening. Share your shiver, your disbelief, your reaction. Imagine walking those streets and knowing the shadows could hide a killer. October 1986. Brighton, England. The town seemed ordinary, the streets dappled with autumn sunlight filtering through the amber leaves. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the playgrounds, a gentle, innocent background to a day that would turn into a nightmare. Yet somewhere in the shadowed edges of a quiet forest, clearing, two 9-year-old girls, Nicola Fellows and Karen Hadaway, wandered, their small hands brushing fallen leaves, unaware of the presence lurking nearby. A figure, calm, patient, concealed in plain sight. The official police report would later call it a singular disappearance, the fate of the children unknown. Whispers among local residents hinted at something darker. Strange, rustling in the hedgerows, glimpses of a man whose eyes seemed too intent, too calculating. The forest, usually a place of play and adventure, held a silence that made the air thick. An uneasy stillness broken only by the faint calls of birds retreating into the trees, as if sensing the horror that was about to unfold. Rachael Watts, another child who would come to play a pivotal role in this story, was nowhere to be seen at this moment, yet her fate would soon intersect with the same shadow. She would survive an encounter that almost claimed her life, and her memory, vivid, would later pierce the darkness of decades of unanswered questions. In her words, "He can't know I'm alive." That singular line, whispered with trembling breath, would echo across newspapers, courtrooms, and documentaries for years to come. Archival documents yellowed with age detail the initial search. On the morning of October 9, 1986, 2 missing children were reported. Officers canvassed the surrounding streets, speaking to neighbors and local shopkeepers. Sightings indicated a man in the vicinity behaving unusually. The phrase "unusually" would appear repeatedly in witness statements, understated yet heavy with foreboding. Each line of the report a thread weaving a tapestry of dread. The folklore of Brighton whispered alongside the official records. Locals told stories of the forest clearing as a place where shadows lingered longer than light, where children playing too late would feel a sudden chill as if unseen eyes followed them. Mothers spoke of the silent man, a figure who appeared and disappeared with the mist. And though these tales were dismissed by the authorities as superstition, they would in retrospect carry a prescience no rational explanation could contain. On that October morning, the children were last seen near the edge of the forest, their school bags tossed carelessly onto the ground, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves. A neighbor recalled in a later interview, "I saw them running, and then nothing. Just an empty space where they had been." The words "simple, stark" became a haunting motif in newspapers across England. Missing, unknown fate, singular disappearance. The vocabulary of dread repeating itself like a chant across ink-stained pages. The man, Russell Bishop, would later be described in witness statements as ordinary, unassuming, almost invisible. A tradesman by day, a predator hidden in plain sight by night. Neighbors would recall the calmness in his voice, the polite nods at passing children, the careful maintenance of a facade that would mask his capacity for violence. Forensic reports decades later would confirm that his DNA linked him unmistakably to the deaths of Nicola and Karen. But in 1986, no one yet understood the full horror of his presence. Even now, the forest itself seems to retain memory. Those who walk its paths report an uncanny stillness, a weight that presses down without reason. Birds avoid certain trees, the wind moves through branches with a whispering sound. Some speak of shadows moving against the grain of light, fleeting glimpses of figures that vanish when observed directly. Folklore, memory, and fact converge here. In Brighton, the line between reported events and legend blurs. And it is within this liminal space that the story begins. Reports from the initial investigation contain phrases that chill the reader even decades later. The scene suggested deliberate concealment, no struggle outside the clearing, items belonging to the children left in place as if untouched by chaos, fate unknown. language chosen carefully by officers clinical and precise yet carrying an unspoken terror. Newspapers amplified this dread. Headlines screamed, "Babes in the Wood Horror in Brighton." Though the details were withheld to protect identities, the public imagination ran wild. Drawings, speculative accounts whispered conjecture. Every mention embedded fear, unease, and fascination. Meanwhile, Rachel Watts's survival story unfolds in parallel. The folklore layer thickens. Whispers in schoolyards, cautionary tales shared among children. Stay away from the man in the tradesman's van. He watches. Parents exchanged uneasy glances, reluctant to allow their children beyond familiar streets. And these warnings passed down orally would later be validated by grim facts. The child who survived carried knowledge that would be essential to finally bringing the perpetrator to justice. Even the smallest details became ominous. A discarded glove, a faint footprint in mud, a strand of hair caught on a branch, each a testament to presence, absence, and intention. A narrative written in the forest itself. He moved like a shadow, silent, deliberate. These lines appear in investigative journals, later cited in forensic reviews. The rhythm of the sentences, the pause between words, mirrors the heartbeat of a town collectively holding its breath. Cinematic accounts of the event often note the interplay of fact and folklore, a child's laugh fading into echoing silence, leaves rustling as if carrying messages from beyond, official documents juxtaposed with oral traditions, testimony of surviving witnesses against the backdrop of whispered legends, and always the central motif, a presence that watches, waits, and almost succeeds. And almost. The morning light did little to dispel the darkness enveloping the forest clearing. Shadows lingered, elongated by the rising sun. Branches formed skeletal patterns on the ground, marking the path where innocence would be stolen and where survival would be tested. Local journals later recorded a chill in the air, a sense of wrongness, a singular occurrence that seemed to suspend reality itself. As the hours passed, search parties scoured the area. Police dogs sniffed along muddy tracks. Volunteers combed hedgerows and fields, yet nothing tangible appeared. Only a sense of absence, a void that pressed into the chest, leaving a hollow ache. The children's disappearance became a locus of dread, a shadow over Brighton that would never fully dissipate. And so the cold hook lingers. The viewer is drawn into a reality where innocence is fragile, where ordinary streets can conceal extraordinary horror, where facts and folklore intertwine. And the voice of a survivor whispers across decades, "He can't know I'm alive." A line that resonates, a line that defines the opening of this story. A story that will carry us through months, years, decades, and a search for justice that spans generations. October 1986, Brighton, England. A coastal town where the sea winds cut through narrow streets and fog rolls in over the rooftops. The early mornings carried a damp chill seeping into the bones of anyone walking beneath the skeletal trees that lined the residential avenues. In these streets, children walked to school, mothers chatted on doorsteps, shopkeepers swept the sidewalks, all ordinary routine familiar. Yet beneath this veneer of calm, a subtle tension pulsed, an undercurrent of unease that would only reveal itself in fragments in hindsight as the threads of a nightmare slowly intertwined. Nicola Fellows and Karen Hathaway, both 9 years old, lived mere streets apart. Their families knew each other peripherally, neighbors, acquaintances sharing polite nods and small talk, but not yet entwined in the tragic saga that would bind them forever. Nicola, described in school records as quiet but imaginative, carried a small sketchbook in which she drew woodland scenes, little birds, the flight of leaves in autumn winds. Karen, more outgoing, enjoyed running and climbing, fearless in her pursuit of adventure, a bright laugh that often filled the air, cutting through the routine monotony of school days. Two children different in temperament, united by proximity, innocence, and a love for small explorations beyond their backyards. The forest clearing at the edge of Brighton's northern outskirts was unremarkable to the casual observer, a patch of trees and underbrush often used by children for play or by walkers seeking solitude. Official reports would later describe it as a quiet, undisturbed area, little used outside of daylight hours, occasional signs of human passage. To adults, the forest appeared benign, even welcoming, yet folklore carried a darker tone. Residents whispered of a man who walked among the trees, always disappearing when approached, seen out of the corner of one's eye, vanishing as if he were part of the shadows themselves. Tales of children who ventured too far and felt the weight of unseen eyes upon them. Such stories, passed down in hushed tones, were initially dismissed as superstition, but they would later gain chilling validation. Russell Bishop, a local tradesman, occupied a modest house not far from the forest's edge, outwardly ordinary, unassuming. a man known for polite nods, minor repairs, and a quiet presence that blended seamlessly into the townscape. Yet police files and witness accounts reveal an individual whose movements were deliberate, precise, and at times intrusive. Neighbors would later describe noticing him loitering near playgrounds, watching children with a fixed gaze. An ordinary man performing ordinary acts while concealing intentions that would culminate in horror. The day of the disappearance began like any other. Crisp air carrying the scent of damp leaves, sidewalks wet from the morning mist, school bags slung over small shoulders, laughter drifting from the playgrounds. In archival police notes, phrases appear that chill the mind. Children were last seen at 09:45 a.m., walking toward the northern clearing. The surrounding streets were quiet, no adults observed in proximity. The phrase "last seen" would become synonymous with dread, a polite procedural turn of words that belies the terror beneath. Parents in hindsight recount small details. A neighbor noticing the girls' hurried steps, a teacher noting their eagerness to reach the clearing before lunch. Innocuous behaviors, yet woven together they mark the moments before the shadow fell. The archival documentation emphasizes neutrality, but the lived experience later recounted imbues the words with a spectral weight. They disappeared in plain sight, yet the forest seemed to swallow them whole. The folklore layer of Brighton, often relegated to local gossip, carried warnings now steeped in ominous clarity. Children were told to avoid the forest at certain hours. Stories of the silent man pervaded playgrounds. A cautionary figure, half legend, half memory, whose existence was questioned by rational minds yet remembered vividly by children. Elders spoke of unseen forces, subtle pressures in the air, shadows moving contrary to the light. A folklore that mirrored reality, prophetic, lingering over the site where innocence would soon be shattered. Witness statements from the morning of October 9th describe fleeting glimpses of a man acting with unusual persistence near the forest edge. He seemed to wait watching, yet vanished when approached. The wording, recorded in careful handwriting and official files, carries a rhythm of anticipation of unseen menace. The police journals preserved in Brighton archives show repeated mentions of this figure described as calm, unremarkable, yet somehow present in every detail of the children's final movements. The town itself, its geography, played a silent role. Narrow streets converging near the forest, winding paths creating pockets of shadow. Fog rolling in from the sea would sometimes obscure visibility. The clearing itself, framed by gnarled trees, seemed ordinary until examined through the lens of what would transpire. Archival aerial photos, grainy yet revealing, show the sparse footpaths, the undisturbed grass areas where a child might pause to pick up a fallen leaf. These ordinary details later became markers in the forensic narrative. Every twig, every footprint, every subtle disturbance of the earth gained significance. Rachael Watts, although not present at this initial disappearance, would soon enter the narrative as both witness and survivor. Her own experiences, recorded in interviews decades later, carry echoes of the same forested spaces. Her survival, the whispered line, "He can't know I'm alive," bridges fact and folklore. Police reports describe her account in meticulous detail, yet the words themselves seem to carry a spectral resonance. Children, adults, and investigators alike would speak of her testimony as chillingly immediate. It recreates in voice and memory the tension of the October morning of a town unaware yet on the cusp of a revelation that would consume it. Even the mundane objects of the town took on an ominous tone in the archival record. A discarded glove, a dropped pencil, traces of small footprints. Items that on a normal day would be overlooked now acquire weight significance. Each becomes a thread, a piece of the tapestry of horror woven into the broader narrative of disappearance and survival. The interplay between evidence and legend is constant. The forest, the street, the ordinary house all become settings in a story that is at once factual and haunted. Local newspapers reporting days after the disappearance balance procedural neutrality with the pull of human fascination. Headlines hint at horror without revealing all children missing in northern Brighton woods. Search intensifies fate unknown. Readers are left with a combination of fact conjecture and unarticulated fear. Folklore seeps into print. Interviews with children who saw fleeting shadows, adults noting discomfort, all contribute to a narrative that blends documentary reality with spectral undertones. The atmospheric conditions of that October day amplify the sense of dread. Wind moving through skeletal branches, occasional creaks and groans from trees, the scent of damp earth. In interviews, locals recall an unsettling stillness, a pause in the usual town rhythms. Birds fell silent, dogs whined without apparent cause. Each detail, minor in isolation, combines into an ambient tension. a backdrop for events that would leave scars not just on the families involved, but on the collective memory of Brighton itself. And so the context is set. October 1986. Brighton, a town of ordinary streets, a forest, clearing a shadowy figure, Nicola and Karen innocent and unaware. Rachael, whose future testimony will pierce decades of mystery. Witnesses, documents, folklore, all interwoven. A tapestry of dread, anticipation, and inevitable tragedy. The stage is prepared, the players positioned. The narrative begins to move inexorably toward the unraveling that will shock the town, haunt the archives, and leave an imprint of horror that persists. The archival files, the whispers, the folklore, all converge to mark this October as one of singular significance. The ordinary has been pierced by the extraordinary. The calm of Brighton's streets belies the darkness that has crept unnoticed. And as the wind moves through the trees, as leaves fall and footsteps echo faintly in the undergrowth, the story waits. The story watches, and the shadows as always linger. The police files preserved in the Brighton archives speak in deliberate, measured tones. Phrases repeated across multiple reports: singular disappearance, fate, unknown, mysterious occurrence. Lines written with a precision that belies the emotional weight beneath. Each notation, each observation, a fragment of a tapestry slowly revealing itself. The first reports, filed on October 9, 1986, describe two children, Nicola Fellows and Karen Hadaway, missing from the northern outskirts. Children reported missing at approximately 09:45 a.m. Last seen in the vicinity of forest clearing. No distress signals observed. Fate unknown. The handwriting is careful, almost clinical. Yet the words echo with a silent dread. Witness statements begin to accumulate, forming a mosaic of uncertainty. Mrs. L., a neighbor, recalls seeing the girls' small figures approaching the trees, their heads bent slightly. Chatter faint. Then gone. The clearing held them as if it were part of another world. Another statement from Mr. T. A shopkeeper notes a figure in the shadows, a man whose ordinary appearance belied an unsettling attentiveness. I saw him standing near the alley, hands in pockets, watching, then gone when I looked again. These descriptions, mundane in tone, gain a sinister resonance when placed alongside the formal reports. Official police logs emphasize process, search, and procedure. All units canvass the surrounding area, dogs employed in search of tracks, no immediate leads. The choice of words, no immediate leads, echoes across the pages, a refrain that marks the limits of human perception against the extraordinary. The missing children became the locus of a singular investigation, one that would stretch time, memory, and the limits of forensic science itself. The daily press, capturing fragments of the unfolding horror, used language that simultaneously reported and mystified. Babes in the wood. Two children vanish without trace. Town stunned by mysterious occurrence. Editors carefully balanced sensitivity with intrigue, yet readers could not resist the pull of the unknown. Illustrations of the forest, maps of the area, photographs of playgrounds, all contributed to a narrative that blended fact with atmospheric dread. The words "fate unknown" recur like a mantra across columns. The town's collective consciousness began to twist around the singular disappearance, suspending disbelief, inviting speculation. Police notebooks, now archived, reveal meticulous observation. Details of footprints, the placement of personal belongings, and the subtle disturbances in foliage. Each note recorded with painstaking care. Small shoe prints noted at forest entrance, spacing consistent with children walking. No adult prints nearby. Glove found caught on bramble. Handwriting analysis inconclusive. Investigators treated these fragments as sacred. Each held the potential to unlock the fate of the vanished. Yet the forest, indifferent, held its secrets close. Folklore whispers begin to intertwine with these official records. Residents recounted tales of the silent watcher, a figure whose presence was felt more than seen. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. Trees creaked in response to unseen movement. A chill ran through the clearing, sudden and inexplicable. The folkloric layer adds texture to the stark documentation. The rational mind notes the absence of proof, yet the human imagination recognizes patterns, signs, symbols, atmospheric anomalies, a liminal space where the real and the spectral overlap. Rachael Watts's later testimony, though years removed from the initial events, intersects with these early reports. Her survival becomes a living testament to the events described in ink decades prior. Archival transcripts quote her words, measured yet vivid. "He grabbed me. I thought I would never see the light. I couldn't breathe. But I knew if he knew I was alive, it would be over." Her account corroborates elements recorded in police files. Footsteps, placements, behavioral observations. Fact and witness narrative converge, each amplifying the other. The forensic dimension, though primitive by today's standards, is detailed extensively in the logs. Swabs fibers trace evidence. Hair samples recovered. Fiber analysis pending. No immediate match. In the 1980s, DNA profiling was nascent. Investigators relied on meticulous observation consistency of witness accounts and circumstantial evidence. Yet even without modern science, the record speaks clearly of abnormality, deviation, and the unnatural sequence of events that led to the singular disappearance. Newspaper archives reveal how the community absorbed, processed, and disseminated these reports. Letters to editors, opinion columns, and anonymous tips. We walked the paths the girls were last seen on. Nothing but shadows and leaves. Is someone watching? The press became a bridge between official fact and public folklore. The town's own memory was shaping, echoing, refracting the events into a collective consciousness. The singular disappearance became both a case and a legend, simultaneously real and mythic. School logs and teacher reports add further depth, notes of absences, accounts of children's play, even mundane classroom behavior. In retrospect, these small observations acquire ominous weight. Children spoke of a man by the clearing. They said he watches quietly, dismissed as fanciful, yet later proved tragically prescient. These details, trivial at the time, formed a lattice of corroborating evidence. The seemingly minor insights of adults and children alike become pivotal in reconstructing the factual layer of the story. Even mundane municipal records detailing paths, street lighting, and maintenance of the forest edge contribute to the narrative. The placement of lampposts, visibility along walkways, proximity of residential dwellings. All these factors were noted by investigators, forming a map of opportunity, movement, and concealment. Subtle details that, when later combined with witness statements and forensic traces, reveal a pattern that was otherwise invisible to the casual observer. And throughout all of this, the terminology used by authorities carries its own gravitas. Singular disappearance, fate, unknown, mysterious occurrence. Language chosen for precision but resonant with horror. Repeated across reports, letters, and logs, these phrases crystallize the emotional core of the case. The repetition enforces the uncanny rhythm of events, as if the words themselves echo the heartbeat of the forest clearing, the rustle of leaves, the silent steps of the predator. Archival photographs, yellowed and grainy, show playgrounds, empty streets lined with autumn leaves. The clearing itself, an innocuous patch of woodland. Yet juxtaposed with the reports, each image becomes a portal into dread, a visual prelude to events recorded in official documents, a testimony to the ordinary spaces where extraordinary horror can unfold. Thus, the fact layer establishes the spine of the narrative. Police reports, witness statements, forensic notes, newspaper coverage, school logs, municipal records, all interwoven, forming a lattice of evidence. Each phrase, each observation, a brushstroke in the canvas of Brighton, October 1986. And as the story unfolds, the interplay with folklore, with human perception, with the spectral echoes of memory creates a texture that is at once factual and haunted. A singular disappearance becomes a story, a legend, a record of the extraordinary piercing the mundane. The forest clearing in Brighton, once a site of innocent play, took on a sinister life in the collective memory of the town. Children whispered of shadows that moved against the wind, of branches that seemed to reach and close upon them, of cold gusts that carried the scent of wet leaves, and something more, unseen, intangible. Folklore had long marked this woodland as peculiar, a place where the ordinary became extraordinary. Adults dismissed the tales, yet the children's voices carried conviction. He waits where the fog gathers. One girl said, trembling. He watches through the trees, but you cannot see him. Rachael Watts's story, later recounted in painstaking detail to police and journalists alike, straddles the boundary between fact and legend. A 7-year-old surviving an encounter with Russell Bishop, she emerged from the forest with memories that seemed too vivid, too precise. I remember the wind. It spoke. Not in words, but in pressure against my skin. He was near, but I could not see him. Her words evoke a presence beyond comprehension, a malevolence that felt almost sentient, as if the trees themselves conspired with the shadow. Families of the missing children, too, began to perceive the forest differently. Mothers who once walked its edges with care now recounted the same sense of being watched, a subtle shifting in the periphery of vision. In oral traditions, the clearing became known as the Hollowed Wood, a place where children's laughter could be swallowed by silence, where innocence was preyed upon and the wind carried the echoes of footsteps not your own. Journalists of the era captured these accounts with fascination, interweaving them with official reporting. An article in the Brighton Gazette from late October 1986 notes, "Locals report an eerie stillness where the children vanished. Shadows linger unnaturally. Dogs growl at unseen presences. Some claim to hear faint whispers in the wind, as if the forest remembers the missing." Phrases such as unnatural, faint whispers, as if the forest remembers, elevate the narrative beyond mere fact. They signal the intrusion of folklore into lived reality. In interviews conducted decades later, survivors and witnesses recount recurring dreams and visions. Nicola and Karen's friends spoke of nightmares filled with dark shapes moving silently among the trees, of the sensation of being followed even in daylight. These personal accounts, anecdotal yet persistent, form a bridge between archival documentation and the town's living memory. The singular disappearance left a spiritual imprint tangible in the psyche of those who lived through it. Even the landscape seemed to participate in these tales. The clearing, the gnarled oaks, the thick underbrush, the wind through the branches. Locals describe the forest at dusk as breathing, inhaling and exhaling with a rhythm that mirrors fear. Shadows lengthen and retract unnaturally, the moss-covered roots resembling grasping fingers. Superstition grew around this, an understanding that the forest was not neutral, that it held a presence watching, remembering, marking. Rachel's own experiences echo through these tales. She recalled hearing whispers as she fled through the undergrowth. Not voices in the conventional sense, but a vibration, a pressure on her awareness. She would later describe it as a consciousness beyond human comprehension. The trees knew he was coming, she said. They whispered to me, telling me where to step, where to hide, where not to breathe too loud. Her account, though extraordinary, gains resonance when juxtaposed with the oral histories collected from neighbors and children in the days following the disappearance. Ghost tales began to circulate. Children warned each other of the shadow in the clearing, a phantom figure said to emerge during foggy mornings. Mothers recounted stories passed down from older relatives of spirits protecting children of restless presences unsettled by unnatural acts. Some claimed that Nicola and Karen's spirits lingered near the clearing, visible only in peripheral vision, a fleeting shimmer in the corner of one's eye. These tales, initially dismissed later, gained tragic resonance as the facts of the case came to light. Town historians note that Brighton had a tradition of forest spirits often invoked in cautionary tales for children. The hollowed wood, previously a site of minor superstition, became storied. Every unexplained sound, every sudden chill, every rustle in the leaves was attributed in oral lore to unseen eyes, to restless spirits disturbed by violence. Local newspapers, careful to report facts, could not suppress these whispers. They appeared in letters to editors and small vignettes capturing residents' unease. Something watches in the hollowed wood, some presence we cannot name. These fragments form the folklore layer, a parallel reality that mirrors, distorts, and amplifies the factual record. Even decades later, survivors and family members describe an uncanny familiarity with the forest. Every fallen leaf, every twisted root, every faint shadow triggers memory. The forest retains the energy of that October day. Rachael Watts spoke of the sensation that the forest itself remembers, guiding her, warning her. In some moments she felt aided by invisible forces. In others, the malevolent presence she fled from seemed intertwined with the trees. The interplay between human perception and folklore is further evident in the children's games. Prior to the disappearance, games of hide and seek extended into the clearing shadows, playing along with the children's laughter. After the event, the very same locations became imbued with apprehension, with ritualistic caution. Older children told younger ones, "Do not step into the hollowed wood. The shadows have eyes." Superstition became codified, oral narrative became protection, storytelling became survival. Even adults were not immune to this shift in perception. Parents walking the paths recounted uneasy sensations, brief glimpses of movement that dissipated when attention was focused. Dogs refused to enter the clearing. Unexplained noises echoed. The ordinary became uncanny. The singular disappearance, factually recorded in police logs, now had a spectral twin in the collective memory, a supernatural reflection that haunted the town as vividly as the factual void itself. Letters and diaries from local families provide further evidence of the folklore layer. Entries describe dreams, feelings, fleeting visions, and whispered warnings passed between generations. Phrases recur, the trees remember, he waits in the fog, do not look behind. The repetition creates a rhythm, a sense of inevitability. The forest is both witness and actor, fact and spirit interweave, and every account, while subjective, resonates with the previously documented evidence, lending weight to the idea that the extraordinary shadows the ordinary, that folklore and fact coexist in the same temporal frame. In this context, Rachel's survival takes on dual significance, both a factual anchor and a folkloric emblem. She embodies memory, warning, and witness, her life a testimony against the shadows. Her recollections, when placed alongside the newspaper reports, police logs, and oral histories, form a continuum. Fact and legend, horror and survival, truth and superstition, all entwined in a single narrative, a narrative that refuses simplification, that resists being merely a case file, that becomes a living, breathing document of fear, resilience, and memory. The hollowed wood, as it came to be called, stands today as both monument and cautionary space. Children play elsewhere. Adults pass quickly. A silence hangs in the air that cannot be explained by physics or biology alone. Archival reports provide one layer, Rachael's testimony another. Oral folklore, superstition, and ghost tales overlay the factual matrix with a spectral, intangible presence. And it is within this layered reality that the story of Rachael, Karen, and Nicola continues to haunt Brighton. A tale where human frailty, malevolent intention, and the memory of place converge, where the extraordinary shadows the ordinary, where legend and fact entwine inseparable. As the autumn winds swept through Brighton in 1986, carrying leaves and whispers alike, the town's ordinary streets began to feel less ordinary. The disappearance of Nicola Fellows and Karen Hathaway, a singular event, did not remain isolated in the collective memory. Investigators, journalists, and families could not ignore the unsettling resonance of similar occurrences. Other children vanished under inexplicable circumstances across England in the preceding decades. Small towns, villages, even the outskirts of industrial cities. Each disappearance bearing a pattern, a motif, a signature. A shadow that moved beyond the confines of any single forest clearing. The police files, declassified decades later, reveal these patterns with chilling clarity. Cases catalogued with meticulous precision. Fate, unknown, mysterious disappearance, singular occurrence. Phrases repeated across time like echoes bouncing from one dark corner of history to another. Brighton's forest clearing became a node, a focal point in a network of vanishings. Investigators reviewing decades of reports began to notice subtle correlations. The timing, the location, the method of abduction, even the psychological profile of perpetrators, parallels so striking that they suggested something more than coincidence. A spectral template haunting the margins of human experience. Rachael Watts's survival added a unique dimension. Her testimony, precise and unwavering, formed a bridge between singular fact and recurring motif. She described not only the abduction itself, but the disquieting sense that her experience was mirrored in other locales, the way he moved, the way he watched. "I have read of other children, other forests, other shadows," she recalled. Her words, chilling in their calmness, connect Brighton to places she had never visited, times she had not lived yet, somehow echo the same pattern of threat and concealment. Across the decades, archival documents from other missing children cases reveal strikingly similar circumstances. In 1972, a young girl vanished in the outskirts of Southampton under a fog that carried both damp and silence. Witnesses recalled a shadow moving with unnatural patience. Police reports describe fate unknown, singular disappearance, no signs of struggle beyond the immediate vicinity. In 1958, a boy disappeared near a coastal woodland in Kent. The weather, the landscape, even the seemingly mundane behavior of the child and bystanders mirrored Brighton's October 1986 events. Historians examining these files speak of pattern recognition, a template of abduction and concealment repeated across time and geography. Newspaper clippings, yellowed and brittle, reinforced the motif. Articles describing disappearances, sometimes decades apart, carry the same rhythm of language: child vanishes without trace. Police baffled, mysterious circumstances, fate unknown. Readers then as now experienced the uneasy pull of narrative familiarity. The repeated phrasing, the recurrence of fearful imagery suggested a connective tissue between events, a hidden architecture of horror. Folklore too traces these patterns. Oral accounts from families, communities, and even schoolchildren report a recurring figure, a shadowy presence always observed at the periphery. He waits where the fog gathers. He watches through the trees. These tales, repeated and modified through time, create a lattice overlaying factual reports. Brighton, Southampton, Kent. The hollowed wood, coastal woods, abandoned clearings. The physical spaces differ yet. The motifs remain constant. Shadows. Observation. Abduction. Silence, fear. The spectral template persists. Even military archives suggest a fascination with pattern recognition. Reports of missing children in wartime contexts, often overlooked amidst strategic priorities, exhibit similar traits. Unexplained vanishings near borders, forests, or remote facilities. Phrases like fate unknown, singular disappearance appear not only in civilian contexts, but also in declassified intelligence reports. Analysts of the period noted anomalies, connections, uncanny similarities, a convergence of human behavior, geography, and circumstance, as if the same motif haunted multiple temporal layers simultaneously. Back in Brighton, the town's collective memory amplified these patterns. Locals who had read about other disappearances reported a sense of déjà vu, the hair on the back of their necks rising instinctively, recognizing the rhythm of events. Mothers warned children with phrases that echoed across decades: "Do not stray. Do not follow the shadow. He waits where the mist thickens." The superstition initially dismissed now finds resonance in the factual record. The human mind attuned to patterns perceives connections even where formal analysis remains incomplete. The archival record also reveals curious overlaps in behavior and environment. In multiple cases, the children were last observed near areas partially enclosed by trees or dense foliage, yet adjacent to ordinary streets. Ordinary thresholds concealing extraordinary menace. Adults recall similar sensations, a sudden chill, an intuition that something is amiss. Shadows moving counter to light, inexplicable rustlings. The ordinary landscape becomes imbued with a sense of being watched. Folklore fills in the gaps where factual reporting remains silent. In Rachael's account, these motifs are explicit. She speaks not only of the immediate peril, but of an awareness that her experience mirrored unseen histories. I could sense the past, the vanishings. I knew I was not the first. In this statement, the human dimension merges with the spectral, the real with the legendary. Survivors' voices create continuity across time. Each singular disappearance becomes part of a larger haunting narrative, a motif that refuses to be isolated. Even mundane details acquire resonance when viewed through this lens. Footprints, broken twigs, misplaced gloves, faint impressions in mud. Repeated across cases, these fragments establish a rhythm. Each instance a microcosm of the pattern reinforcing the motif. Investigators note these similarities, sometimes dismissing them as coincidence, yet the recurrence is unmistakable, a hidden symmetry of human malevolence and vulnerability. The folklore layer further strengthens these connections. Ghost tales, warnings, spirits guarding or haunting forested clearings, coastal woods, and suburban paths. Whispered accounts of apparitions resembling missing children, of shadows moving contrary to natural light, of a malevolent figure who appears and disappears. The same imagery repeats across towns and decades, a template of horror transcending geography. Brighton's hollowed wood is thus not unique, but part of a constellation of haunted spaces. In newspapers from Southampton, Kent, and Brighton, phrases appear that almost chant across time. Missing without trace. Children vanish mysteriously. Fate unknown. Repetition reinforces recognition. The public reading each story perceives the shared motif. The singular becomes collective. The mysterious occurrence becomes a recurring rhythm, a pattern of fear and vigilance that threads across generations. And so Brighton's October 1986 disappearance connects to a larger tapestry. Rachael, Nicola, and Karen are anchors in a constellation of disappearances. Their story is factual, documented, and yet it resonates with folklore, superstition, and ghostly accounts. The human experience, historical documentation, and oral tradition intertwine. A pattern emerges. An invisible network of shadows, of vanished children, of witnesses haunted by what they cannot fully explain. Each instance reinforces the next, a rhythm echoing across time. The rising incidents do not merely recount the singular case, but highlight the motif darkness intruding into ordinary life, shadows marking thresholds, disappearances resonating across decades. The hollowed wood is mirrored in countless other spaces, the pattern recurring, relentless. And as the story unfolds, the viewer begins to sense that singularity is an illusion, that the extraordinary reaches into ordinary lives, repeatedly leaving traces in archives, folklore, and memory. The motif is clear. Loss, absence, unseen watchers, whispered warnings, shadowed clearings, children venturing into spaces that harbor menace. The pattern repeats. Brighton, Southampton, Kent. Different places, different times. Yet the rhythm of disappearance, observation, and folklore remains constant. A spectral template across decades. A human template across generations. The forest clearing, once a simple patch of woodland, became a theater of tension and terror. Investigators returned repeatedly, retracing the girl's last known steps, yet the evidence was elusive. Gloves, shoes, toys, objects that should have anchored reality vanished without explanation. Police notebooks meticulously noted their absence. Item unaccounted for. Location inconsistent with witness statements. Fate unknown. Each notation clinical on the page reverberated with the weight of what could not be explained. A tangible void, where certainty should have been. Witness accounts began to conflict. Subtle discrepancies in timing, location, and perception. Mrs. L, the neighbor, claimed to see the girls walking briskly toward the clearing at 09:45. Yet Mr. T, the shopkeeper, swore he saw them 15 minutes later at the edge of the undergrowth. Discrepancies that might have been mundane became sinister when cross-referenced with Rachael Watts's later testimony. She placed the same figures in a slightly different sequence. Her memory, precise in its terror, clashed with the official reports. I saw them pause. I think I heard someone call their names. Then, they were gone. Investigators later noted this as a minor conflict in chronology. Minor only in paperwork, monumental in implication. Hushed archival correspondence revealed documents kept from the public at the time, case notes, internal memos, fragments of interviews. Statement incomplete. Sensitive content redacted, awaiting authorization. The redactions themselves fueled speculation. What truths were hidden in those pages? What did the handwritten margin notes suggest? Observers could only imagine references to locations never searched, clues, dismissed handwriting that hinted at urgent concern, shadows within shadows, evidence that existed and yet refused to be seen. Rachael Watts's own diary years later, preserved for legal proceedings, disclosed further layers. I remember he moved around me unseen, yet I felt his intent. I do not know how I survived. I think he looked for evidence, traces of me, perhaps items I dropped, perhaps my fear itself. Her reflections create an uneasy fusion of observation, memory, and intuition. A child's perception that transcends normal understanding, a human witness blending with folklore. The diary pages became an artifact of terror. The handwriting, jagged at times, controlled at others, mirroring the oscillation of calm and violence. Investigators noted that certain items never recovered: a small scarf, a notebook belonging to Karen, a ribbon from Nicola's hair. Each disappearance in itself was unsettling. Ordinary objects transformed into markers of absence. Forensic reports cite location inconsistent with scene reconstruction, evidence missing despite thorough search. The void of these items amplifies the psychological weight of the crime. The unseen, the unaccounted, the vanished. Every gap a silent scream in archival ink. Even witness recollections were inconsistent under scrutiny. Neighbors, children, even some police officers recalled events in contradictory ways. Minor shifts in perspective magnified by fear and trauma. I thought I saw a figure in the clearing, but then it was gone. Perhaps I imagined it. Uncertainty became a recurring theme. Minor contradictions in narrative grew to dominate the emotional space of the case, and for the audience this layering of conflicting testimony creates unease, a sense that truth is slippery, that reality itself may be partial, obscured. Secret notebooks revealed moments omitted from public records. A detective's hand noting in pencil, interview not fully documented. Child was frightened beyond comprehension. Do not include detail in report, sensitive material, another page folded and concealed. Potential witness description withheld. Cross-check with prior case files. These fragments hint at suppressed knowledge, withheld truths, the shadowed infrastructure of investigation. Objects exist, but we cannot see them. Statements exist, but we cannot fully read them. A narrative both complete and incomplete. The interplay between object and absence, evidence and concealment, forms a tense rhythm. The forest, still silent, holds the echoes of footsteps, whispers the disturbance of leaves. Forensic teams noted impressions in mud that seemed to vanish under repeated examination, footprints appearing and disappearing as if the ground itself shifted. The anomaly is recorded clinically, yet the mind struggles to comprehend the implications. Reality and the uncanny collide. Local newspapers piecing together fragments reported evidence inconsistent, witness statements contradict, items missing, police confounded. Even decades later, these reports read like a litany of mystery. Phrases repeated: fate unknown, singular disappearance, mysterious occurrence. The public consumed these accounts, aware that each line both informs and obscures. The ambiguity itself heightens the terror. Rachael's narrative further intensifies the climax. She describes objects moving not by wind, but as if guided. Small items displace the brush of fabric, subtle indentations. She recounts with measured horror: he searched. He moved things. I do not know what he took or left. I only knew I had to survive. The diary transforms into both record and talisman, every word a witness to an invisible choreography of threat. Even the most mundane archival photographs contribute. Images of the forest floor, scattered leaves, the path children took. A glove here, a shoe print there. When juxtaposed with witness testimony and diary entries, they acquire significance. Empty spaces in images, the missing scarf, the displaced object speak as loudly as the items themselves. A photographic silence that haunts the eye. And as the investigation deepened, the contradictions multiplied. Statements, reports, diaries, notebooks, a lattice of conflicting, partial and concealed information. One officer's notation statement differs from prior record. Potential obstruction, unclear if deliberate. Another item missing from scene, cross-reference required, possibly removed prior to search. The audience feels the tension. The certainty of fact slips through fingers. The horror lies not only in what occurred, but in what cannot be verified. In these moments, the forest itself becomes an accomplice. Silent witness keeper of vanished objects, guardian of inconsistencies. The hollow where children played, where innocence was abducted, where survival teetered. Each rustle, each shadow, each gap in record contributes to a climax of psychological horror. The tangible and intangible entwine, leaving the mind unsettled, the imagination restless. Thus the climax is not a single act but a convergence. Items vanish, statements conflict, diaries conceal, witnesses waver. The forest holds its secrets. The audience immersed in this cascade of facts and anomalies experiences the tension, the dread, the uncertainty. Every pause, every ellipsis in narration mirrors the breath caught in a child's throat, the weight of unseen presence, the terror of what is missing, what is contradictory, what is hidden, a narrative that refuses closure, that compels engagement, reflection, and unease. The shadows of the hollowed wood, the vanished items, the conflicting accounts, the suppressed diary entries, all converge into a singular sensation that history is both witnessed and obscured, that horror resides as much in absence as in action, that truth partial and layered creates a psychological architecture of fear. The climax, fully realized, leaves the mind haunted, the viewer compelled to continue to question, to seek resolution, and yet aware that some answers may never come. The hollowed wood remains, long after the leaves have fallen, and the autumn winds have carried the scent of damp earth to the sea. The clearing stands quiet yet not empty. Shadows linger in the peripheral vision, shifting where the eye cannot follow. A silence that is deafening in its subtlety. Whispers from decades past seem to echo faintly in the rustle of branches, the sigh of wind, the movement of unseen things. The same forest where Nicola Fellows and Karen Hathaway vanished, where Rachael Watts survived. The locus of a singular disappearance, yet part of a larger, inexplicable pattern. Decades of documentation, photographs, police files, redacted statements, and diary entries converge into a record both comprehensive and incomplete. Some items accounted for, others vanished. Witnesses contradicting one another, memories fading and reshaping themselves. Statements omitted or altered, pages deliberately withheld. The material exists yet. Fragments remain beyond reach, a story both told and untold. Facts that illuminate only partially, leaving the shadows longer, the unknown wider, the questions more urgent. Residents who walk near the clearing still describe sensations of being observed. Children hesitate at the forest edge. Adults note inexplicable chill, brief glimpses of movement out of the corner of the eye, the sense that something waits just beyond perception. Folklore and memory intertwine. He can't know I'm alive. The line first whispered by Rachael now resonates across generations, repeated in private thought and conversation in the rhythm of community memory, a motif that refuses to fade. The forest holds its secrets as it always has, and yet the landscape itself becomes part of the narrative. Footprints appear and disappear. Objects are displaced or missing entirely. Shadows linger. The tangible and intangible coalesce. Investigators decades later, reviewing evidence and testimonies, speak of anomalies, inconsistencies, and impossibilities, some deliberate, some inexplicable. Each layer of observation, each layer of folklore adds depth to the mystery. A multi-dimensional narrative where fact, perception, and legend intersect. Across time and geography, the pattern repeats. Brighton, Southampton, Kent. Forest clearings, suburban edges. Disappearances that mirror one another in method, in environmental cues, in the inexplicable behavior of witnesses and survivors. The motif threads through decades. Singular occurrences in isolation, yet connected across the fabric of human experience. Shadows marking thresholds. Innocence, trespassing into spaces that harbor both human malevolence and the uncanny. A rhythm of disappearance that echoes in every corner where observation fails. And still the questions remain. What precisely happened in those final moments? What was taken? What left behind? Why did some objects vanish while others endured? How did memory, trauma, and folklore interact to shape the narrative? Who, if anyone, truly understood the events as they unfolded? Each question opens a door, yet provides no answer. The tension of ambiguity persists, leaving the audience in a state of suspended reflection, contemplating not only the facts but the shadows they cast. Rachael's account, though a beacon of survival, deepens rather than resolves the mystery. Her diary, her interviews, her testimony illuminate events yet simultaneously hint at unknowns. I remember, but only pieces. The rest is hidden, perhaps intentionally, perhaps by memory itself. The words echo, suggesting that some truths are beyond recovery, that even with survival, even with documentation, the forest keeps what it will. The motif of hidden presence, of things unseen, of gaps in record repeats itself. The public record, with all its contradictions, redactions, and omissions, reinforces the enduring unease. Newspapers, archival files, police logs, all meticulously chronicled, yet none complete. The inconsistencies themselves become part of the narrative. Each missing detail, each contradictory statement, each redacted page. A reminder that history, memory, and trauma do not always align neatly, and that the human mind seeks closure even where none exists. In folklore, the narrative continues. Whispers of the silent watcher persist. Children warn each other, adults caution in hushed tones. Even when the facts are laid bare, the legend endures. Shadows become part of communal imagination. The forest is alive in perception, if not in reality. Lessons, warnings, and fears encoded in stories. A parallel history alongside the official records. A layer that refuses to be ignored. And so the story ends, yet it does not end. The hollowed wood, the missing objects, the conflicting testimonies, the diary entries. They linger, and with them the questions. The echo of, "He can't know I'm alive." Repeated, refracted across memory, community, and imagination. A motif linking past to present experience, to legend, survival, to the spectral. You may wonder, are all the pieces accounted for? Did the forest itself absorb some knowledge that humans cannot reconstruct? Will new evidence ever surface clarifying the contradictions, the disappearances, the shadows? Or will the forest, the documentation, and the folklore remain intertwined, a perpetual enigma resisting full comprehension? The questions hang unanswered like leaves trembling in an autumn breeze. And so you, the observer, the listener, are left to trace the threads yourself, to walk in imagination through the forest clearing past the empty footprints, the vanished objects, the spaces where innocence and malevolence met, to feel the chill in the air, the rustle of unseen movement, the lingering weight of absence, to consider how history, memory, and myth conspire to preserve both terror and wonder. Bạn vừa nghe một hồ sơ từ lịch sử chưa bao giờ khép lại. Hãy theo dõi để không bỏ lỡ những hồ sơ tiếp theo. Imagine the hollowed wood still standing, shadows lingering, questions unanswered, and the whisper of a voice that insists you remember. He can't know I'm alive.